Good morning, everybody, and thank you for rejoining us. I know there's been, as I said in the email, a little bit of a hiatus from the last time that we met. There's been an active working group, just kind of punching through some things, and that's Ted Carmen along with Jonathan and Joffrey and Joe, John Marion. So they've been really, it's been back and forth, a lot of good discussion. But I felt it really was time that we bring everybody together, kind of give you a sense of where we are, and then some of the next steps moving forward. So what I'd like to do is then turn this over to Ann Burke. We were just kind of talking about, I said, hey, Ann, how long have you been doing this? And she said, since March, the end of March. And while I think it kind of feels a little bit more like a couple years, and that's in a good sense, because there's been a lot of work that has happened in a lot of these meetings, between tours and forums and things of that nature. We're really getting to the point of still in the planning stages of the funding from Mass Development. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ann.
So we wanted to take this time today. The working group has been terrific. And for those of you who are on this working group, I want to thank you for your very candid and good conversation about budgets and fee structures and different scenarios that we would like to come to consensus around and then present back to this larger group. Rob and John have been very helpful from the city. John is away this week, so he's not here this morning. But just to give you, we're not going to go into, because this is a work in progress, but we wanted to give you an update on where we are. We've had the working group has had 2 or 3 meetings, two big long meetings, and I think one other one. What we have done is take a look at budgets from all of the other bids in Massachusetts, as well as the fee structures from all the other bids in Massachusetts. We have drilled down on the budget that we are proposing to do what you have identified as your priorities. As we have gone through this process of engagement, talking to people, focus groups, and other things. The primary chunk of this budget is around sort of a clean and safe effort. And so we really wanted to get comfortable that we had some realistic numbers to share. Rob, you can jump in here with some conversation around this, but one of the things that we started with was a scenario that had been prepared, but Rob had prepared, that looked at our district, looked at the level of service that we might want to be able to provide, and out to get some quotes, but these are preliminary estimates of what this might cost us, and also what other bids are paying, who have this kind of a program, are paying. So we compared those existing very new contracts that people have had elsewhere, and then we went out to the 2 national vendors, Street Plus and Block by Block, a smaller vendor who does work. It was some bids in New Jersey, I think it's in New Jersey, in the Newark area. And then also we talked to Father Bill's group about, what are the capabilities of that organization to play a role, whole or in part, to providing these kinds of services. So that took a little effort and time to kind of extract some preliminary budget estimates from them. The initial budget estimates we got back, given the larger scope that we had proposed, were pretty high, to be frank. They were not aligned with what others are paying for similar kinds of work, and they were pretty high. So we had some one-on-one conversations with these vendors and said, and they asked us to give us what are the must-haves here, and then we compared that. We went back and talked to Worcester and some other areas around what does your program of service actually look like. So we have received some revised estimates that are more aligned. One of them, we haven't heard from 2 groups that are more aligned with that are in the range of where we thought we could support in a budget. We had a conversation with Father Bill's. Their initial reaction was this was beyond the scope of what they might be able to do, given how their work program works right now. But they were willing to go back and talk amongst their staff and get back with us this week, hoping we have something from them today around what piece or could they work with us on some aspect of this. They currently do have a contract with the city for some services, and whether or not that really can play out in reality with what our expectations are and what we would need. Rob, you want to add anything to that, or is that
It's rare that I have nothing new to add, but we are recording, so I gotta do the show. As Ann said, we slice and dice the figures and compare ourselves with Worcester and what services they were getting. We're looking at different levels of service within the district. How many streets are getting cleaned and serviced? Do we have cleaning and greening versus hospitality and safety ambassadors? How many streets get service on what particular days? And I think we've come up with something that we're going to be looking forward to presenting to you all as sort of this menu of options. And each, as you add it all up, we get to different prices and different assessments on each of the properties. But it really is up to what the group, the property owners, are going to want for services. I did have a conversation with Ann about how do we, or could we phase in things? Could we try, doing this for 2 years and then adding this in year 3? And from what she has told me is that if we change the assessment or want to change the assessment by adding more, because we're adding more services, that means we have to go through the entire process again of getting recertified, which means the petition drive, which means going back to city council. And this is already a lot of fun as it is now. So I would hope that you would think, as property owners, you would get you would choose the level of services that you want and then move forward with that assessment level. But we're very, very, very close with sharing what the costs are with different levels of service. So just
And it's
bear
also
with us a little while longer.
and it's also interesting because we've had a lot of discussions around with the other bids that are offering these kinds of services, is how do they schedule and deploy these folks over the course of a year? So so we've drilled down on how that service is delivered. Is it more during the summer and then less during the winter? Are they more on demand? Do they deploy their people given when they have events? So we've got some suggestions around how that personnel can be deployed. Because the most expensive thing, obviously, when you're trying to run a program, is the labor cost, the labor, and that will impact the budget. So I think we are close. What I wanted to make sure that we came back to you with were some realistic expectations about what the type of programs and services you might be able to deliver for the budget that you might have, and then comparing that to how other people are doing it, and how their programs have worked in their communities. So I think when we come back to you, which hopefully will be shortly, we're waiting for a couple more people to respond back with some suggested revisions. We will have something that we're going to be comfortable with, because I think it's always a really bad idea to overpromise and not be able to deliver given what you have for a budget. So
every bid that we talked to said that they had phased in services. How were they able to do that without going back to
yes, the way that when you look at your petition and when you look at your first plan, this is a 3-year plan. Okay, so no bid comes out of the box on day one delivering everything that they have in their plan on day one. So some of them have phased in those services, but they've planned for that. So when they think about their overall budget, and how they want to deploy these things over, and there's nothing to say that you couldn't.
And it's easier to say that it's pay as you go. So they are waiting for the first or second level of assessment so that they have
to come in
reserves to pay for it.
Right.
I don't think, BAT wants to write a check for the whole thing up front.
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly, that's how it works. But there is the opportunity that you might, depending on how you construct your fee structure, you might say it's going to start with this, but you need to state it up front. So you're not going back through the whole process again. So you're thinking about it as a 3-year plan, and you may, and the fact that it's going to take a bit of time to ramp up these services. So you may start with something that's, most of the bids start with things that are very tangible, highly visible, where you can show progress on right away, and then you start to build in and layer in things as you get up and operational.
How about any questions, any additional questions? And again, there's lots of things going on, right? There are the continual working group, but you know, many of you have not been participating in the meetings since the last time. And I guess the good news is that there's still good discussions going on. I was just at Brockton Bear last night with Tisha, and just having this very conversation about the activities, and you know, they want to do an Oktoberfest, and there's things going on, but you know, there's lots of different needs for downtown, and you know, you need someone, a person who's going to help coordinate this, anything and everything. But it's also you know, to the points that have been going on the smaller working group, is there has to be a cap, there has to be all in, there has to be a level of expecting, so you know what your budget is. And you know, conversations like, you know, is this going to be an increased every year? And you know, all of those things have come into mind and have been discussed. So again, it's at a level that, as both Ann and Rob have said, that continued discussion, and the clean and safe are the priorities.
Well, yeah, right. That's the big variable in your budget. So, you know, the other priorities you've talked about are some of the marketing or activations, the placemaking kinds of things that you all want. Those are a little easier to budget. You know, so the big variable in your budget is going to be around this effort for clean, safe, and welcoming kind of a program. So so that's the one number we really wanted to pin down. The others you can move up and down as you choose, but you really have to have your head around, you know, what does that package look like? So I'm going back to the priorities that you've identified through this engagement process, all the focus groups, the surveys, the individual conversations, what people have said they wanted, and they kind of fall into these few buckets. And then how do you budget for those buckets? And the big variable here is the clean and safe one. So that's the number we really wanted to be comfortable with, so that when you're and give you some choices around how that might be constructed. So that's where we are, and we're very close on those numbers, and we're close to being able to offer you some suggestions for your consideration. Now, aligned with that, the second piece of this is the working group. John and I have been working on presenting a variety of different scenarios of how that fee structure might come into play. So we probably got a good half dozen of them that range from A to Z, and what that means. And we had some very good candid conversations back and forth around, do we need to cap some of these for some of the property owners that own a lot of property in aggregate, or individual properties? How do we do this in fairness to the smaller property owners? So we've done a lot of analysis around that. And rather than presenting this larger group with a half a dozen different scenarios, it's my hope that the smaller group, which is comprised of some smaller property owners and others, will be able to hammer out a scenario that they have a comfort level with, that we can suggest, this is the fee structure we are proposing to the group. And I think that work with that smaller group will be productive, and hopefully over the next several weeks we will come to consensus, hopefully, around that. And then related to that is the list of things that we're working on with the city, with Rob and John and others, to say, here's what the city might be able to bring to the table, including, a request potentially for some cash involvement to support some of this effort, as well as other stuff that we need to execute this plan. So it might be, places to store vehicles or equipment, or it could be support for events and activations. It could be, other kinds of things around DPW. And then also, what are the baseline services? So we're trying to, on various levels, work on all of these things at the same time, so that the menu that we have, that we create, that we're requesting with the city's partnership, will fit into this budget and fit into the overall 3-year plan that that we're developing.
How about questions from anybody in terms of status or?
Joe Casey.
Hi, Joe, go right ahead.
Question on, I don't think it's been covered yet, governance structure with the bid that's typical. Is this something that the DBA will be running point on and assuming leadership, and do they get paid as part of this? And what percentage of the cost of goes to governance versus services?
So I in the budget that we'll be sharing, so what we're proposing in a draft budget is to have the bid be staffed by about a 1.5 FTE kind of equivalent. And the way that most bids look at their budget, their staff, is that very little of a small percentage of that is truly administrative, and most of it is allocated programmatically. Because if you are executing and creating events or making doing marketing activities, that staff is really a project manager kind of role, and
Right.
it needs to be thought of in that way and allocated that way. And a lot of you do that. I'm sure, Cynthia, you do that in how you're looking at your work. But typically the bids are set, all the new bids are formed as 501c3 organizations. The most two recent bids grew out of downtown organizations, business associations. And how they have done that is that the bids are formed. Once the bids are formed, they actually are a legal entity. They are governed by a board of directors. They're set up as a 501c3. They're governed by a board of directors that's comprised of mostly property owners and other stakeholders. And in your bylaws, you would determine what that board of directors is going to look like. In both cases, both of the new bids that came out of business associations, downtown organizations, there's been a management agreement between those organizations. So if there's an existing organizations so the bids money and the bids governance published through the directors, that you make the decisions around your bid, collected by the city and given to the bid to execute your program of services that you've outlined in your petition. Typically, if there's an existing organization, you want that organization to assume that management responsibility. There's an agreement between the two. But the governance of that is with the bid board that you've established as your own 501c3.
And Joe, if I could just weigh in. So the good news, bad news. The good news is that we're still in the DBA is still kind of getting itself together, and the interim that is not for life, that I am currently holding on to, the interim president of the DBA. I've been kind of like, every month when I hold a DBA meeting, I said, hey, who wants to come in and join this executive committee? But at the same time, the fact that this is probably the most engaged that I have seen businesses, this bid group, most engaged of property owners. And that to me is worth its weight in gold. And so the structure, I think, is important. And as Ann alluded to, that the board of the property owners will need to be formed. But, internally between the treasurer of the DBA and our accountant, we just talked about it recently, that we have a 501c3, right? Yes, thank you. I'm probably getting it I haven't finished my coffee this morning, everybody, but the point is that we're poised to do whatever that's needed to make this entity be successful. And I think that part's really important, that the both can exist. But let's be really cognizant about as we move forward.
Yeah, most of the organizations that have grown into BIDS kind of retain their business association as a subgroup to that. So that's a great way for you to keep your businesses engaged and work closely, and then have a management agreement back and forth between the two. You don't have to, but the BID will be its own 501c3 and have its own governance and control over its own funds.
Other questions?
Mayor,
So,
Oh, I'm
go
sorry,
ahead, Joe.
Mary.
Kevin?
So how many people are actually going to be on the board? Is there already a determination of?
You guys
the amount?
determine that. You will determine that. I will draft bylaws for you that you will also review and determine if you want them based, and I have all of the other bylaws that are out there, so that, you know, that they're and the composition of the board typically is one that is, you try to make sure that you have, you know, some all of your key stakeholders on it. It's mostly property owners or their representatives. You try to get large, small, geographically dispersed types of businesses, the city, and other key stakeholders. There's a college or other players in your district. You construct your board in that way. You determine the number of people on your board. Some boards are, you know, like 11 people. Other boards are 30. You know, you can determine that locally exactly how you want to set up your board. And everyone is a little bit different. Hopefully you don't have like 50 people on your board. That's hard, you know, but most of them have, you know, a reasonable number. You try to be geographically and size dispersed, and so that you make sure that everybody has a representation. And also, if you have residents in your downtown, even though you are excluding in our scenario, we have excluded small residential units and condominiums. You always have, all BIDS have a residential representative on your board, because they are very important to your downtown and you want to hear that voice. So that's how most BIDS are constructed, but it's primarily composed of property owners.
So for people's purposes, I just put the Springfield BID bylaws in the chat just to give a bit of a review. They're the longest BID that is in Massachusetts, and I just pulled them off from a search. So they may not be the most up to date, but it gives you at least a little bit of a
I have all the up-to-date
Yep,
bylaws
yep,
of everybody. So
yeah, I heard. Yep, I heard
so
you
don't
say
get you can and we'll draft some bylaws for this group to consider, and you can make your bylaws however. There are some best practices around bylaws for BIDS. But you can make your bylaws however you would like to do that. And some are in the process of updating their bylaws, like Worcester's doing theirs right now.
So I know I'm gonna lose a couple people. It's getting to be almost 8:30, but I just other questions while we have the time today. Let me also inform this group that the two co-chairs, Joe Casey, John Marion, myself, will be meeting with Mayor Sullivan a week from Friday. And Ann and Rob and John Fay and Amanda are going to be invited. It's going to be an update that there's been an ongoing group meeting since March. Lots of different things have happened. Want to continue to update him, but also to have his continued support for us moving forward. Because again, it's going to be that private-public partnership that's required for the BID. And we'll update you about the results of that. So just because there's some folks that had not been on, but Joe Gonzalez, who is the owner of 19 Main Street, and Joe's been working hard on his downtown property. So if you haven't met him, he's pretty awesome. He's been around the city for a long time, used to be on the BRA board, but also Tisha Severa from Brockton Beer Company just had joined us in the meantime. So thank you both for attending, but also for the others for not giving up. Sometimes I'm a big believer that, I mean, sometimes too many meetings are over the top, but it had been a few weeks that the group had been brought together, and really important that the momentum really is still continuing. So
Yeah, for any of you who are new, and just feel like you'd like to not like take this meeting to get brought up to speed, I'm happy to do that. If you'd like to call me or email me, and I can share with you all the stuff that we've done so far. And also Mary has it all in the, available, all the meetings and
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
forth.
Cynthia, did you have a?
Yeah, I was just gonna just give a little bit of a little commercial about the meeting that we had with the other bids. Springfield came, Worcester came, for the newer folks that are here today, and they described their bids to us and how they did it, and what worked. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the meeting, I asked the woman from Worcester, I said, what's your biggest thing that you could tell us, to encourage us? And she said, be realistic about the price of what it's going to cost, what you want to do. Be realistic, and then leverage money, other money. And as you can hear from Ann and Mary, this is in our small group, that's what we've been hammering out. What's it going to cost? Because when we go to talk to businesses, that's the first question. What's this going to cost me, right? And so that's a huge part of the work. And so all this background work is super important, and it's going to really, by the time we hammer it all out, we're going to be able to have a good focus to then present, and then we're going to sell it. We're going to sell this thing to downtown, because we have to do this. We have to have something to take off downtown, right?
That's right.
So this is exciting.
I think the other thing I just wanted to add on to that from the conversation with both Springfield and Worcester is that and Worcester does it less so than Springfield, but how you leverage the resources that you can generate. Springfield, Central Square, almost every other bid in Massachusetts does a great job of leveraging their dollars. So in many cases, it's like Springfield, but only 60% of their budget comes from their bid fees. They actually do a ton of grant writing, sponsorship development. The city participates. They have a number of other ways of bringing revenue into to accomplish their program. So I think you'll see that the bids, even the newer bids, like Central Square and Newmarket, have done a terrific job of leveraging those dollars. So I think that that's important to think about, and to take that attitude forward, that you're going to be able to do that. And right now, the state is very interested in placemaking programs, marketing programs, other kinds of things, that Health and Human Services, that there are programs available to pursue, particularly now that bids can be 501c3s.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for the enthusiasm as always, but because we are going to need all support. And again, the goal will be, we're going to meet after the mayor's meeting a week from Friday, and then we'll bring everybody together to regroup on strategy. So everybody here on this call, as well as those that will be receiving the recording, will play an important role as we move forward. So any other questions before we sign off? Thank you. If you're interested in a tour of 93 Center Street, Concord Square's development, noon today, we're all going to be, the DBA is inviting, or Ted has invited the DBA members. So come see it. I can't wait. Anyway, come see it if you're able to be there. Oh, you're muted, Ted. Oh. There you
So
go.
when you come, we'd love to show you around. Come to the back of the building. Don't try to go to the front.
Gotcha. We'll be, okay, great. Thank you. And again, thank you, everybody. And you'll be getting a notice from me with a recording of this, but also setting the dates as we move forward. So if you've had any past meetings on your calendar, just wipe them off. We're going to start anew. Just because I think it's important to not get, I've got people showing up at a meeting and there is none. So Joe
That's
Casey and John Marion will be talking next week before the mayor's meeting, so we can regroup and update heading into that meeting. So thank you, everyone.